As many as 104 million people of faith, including 32 million self-identified Christians who regularly attend church, are unlikely to vote in the upcoming 2024 presidential election on November 5th, mainly due to lack of interest. This is according to research from the Cultural Research Center in Arizona Christian University that's headed up by my friend, Dr. George Barna. Dr. Barna is a professor at Arizona Christian University and the director of research at its Cultural Research Center, which focuses on worldview assessment and development and cultural transformation. I invited Dr. Barna to come on the show with me today and talk to me about this most recent survey that he sent out, which is both alarming and also possibly transformative in terms of Christians coming out to vote. Dr. Barna and I are going to talk about this, and I think it's an important conversation for you to share with your pastor and your friend. You guys, when Christians turn out to vote, we win. This is going to be a great conversation. This is the Heidi St. John podcast. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Well, how are you guys doing? How are you holding up? We are coming into the home stretch for the election right now. And as I've been telling you guys for a long time, I'm going to keep saying it. I believe the Christians have an incredible opportunity to be a voice for real change in this coming election season. We're just now less than a week out from Election Day in the United States. If you are in an area where you can vote early, do it today. Take your ballot down and vote. Many of you guys saw me talking about this on my Instagram the other day, how people are literally setting ballot boxes on fire here in the Pacific Northwest. But I think that the intent of this, which is to disenfranchise voters and to scare people, is going to backfire because more and more people than ever before are saying that they are going to get out and vote. My guest today has been doing a study on this. His study was both alarming and it illustrates a tremendous opportunity for the church to get out and vote. I also want to remind you before Dr. Barna comes on today that I am doing a prayer every single day at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and you guys can become a part of that. There are hundreds of people that are joining me on that call. It's an amazing opportunity for us to come together and pray in unison. On Tuesdays, we fast and we pray together, fasting just another weapon in our arsenal of spiritual weapons. This is a spiritual battle, and spiritual battles require spiritual weapons. You guys, I loved this conversation. Please welcome my friend, Dr. George Barna, to the Heidi St. John podcast. So, George Barna, it is such a delight and a privilege to have you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Heidi, you're a brave person having me on. Thanks for doing that. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to get along just fine because everyone who's ever heard me speak knows I'm a super fan of your work. I use your charts all the time. Actually, I've probably quoted you to the point where people might think I'm stealing your work. So I'm just here to correct the record today and have you on the show. So it's such an honor. I'm glad you're here. You have been doing at the forefront of a lot of research that impacts the church. And I've been talking about it, as I just said, for many, many years. And I was really interested to see you jumping into the 2024 races. And I heard you quoted actually on a really big podcast the other day, talking about the fact that there's a whole heck of a lot of people who claim the name of Jesus, who would say that they're evangelicals, who simply are just not engaging in the process. And my belief is if Christians would engage, I think we'd win. But I mean, I could be wrong. What prompted you to jump into the evangelical voting swamp? I'd really like to know.
Yeah, it's funny to me to hear you say that because I actually got into politics before I got into anything else that I do. I started out as a campaign manager. I was a chief of staff for people, in legislative offices. I was doing political polling.
I knew we were going to get along great. I knew it. I knew it in my bones.
From the age of 21, that was when I did my first campaign polling. So that's what got me into all this. I went to grad school, got degrees in political science with a concentration in survey research. So that actually came before I even became a follower of Christ.
Wow.
And that when you say jumping into this, I do this roughly every 4 years where I try to let the church know where things are, where they stand in terms of the election. And so this particular study was nothing unusual. We're going to put another one in the field the day after the election to do a postmortem on this year's race. But yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by politics. I know it makes a difference. One of the things
Yep.
that I constantly track is what impacts people's spiritual lives, what impacts their worldview. And I know that public policy is one of the things that makes a huge difference in what people think is moral, what people think is appropriate. And so keeping a finger on that particular pulse of the culture is important to me.
So, what do you say then when people say, oh, Christians shouldn't be involved in this? We shouldn't push our morality out into the public square?
I was born in New York City. We tend to be pretty direct. And so I'll either
I
say,
was born in Portland. We're going to get along just
all
fine.
right, this is good. Yeah. You know, I tell them, get a clue, would you? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a Christian, you're called to influence the culture for Christ. And so as we look at that culture, we know that we've got different domains within the culture. We've got family, we've got education, we've got politics and government, we've got business, we've got all these different areas that we can have influence in. And there's not a single one of them where Jesus said or where the Bible tells us, oh, no, avoid that sector. You
Yeah,
don't
that
want to
one's
be
dirty. Stay
influential
out of
there.
that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, don't touch. No, I mean, we're supposed to be in the center of those, affecting the way that people think about the issues germane to that particular sector. So politics is just one of those. It's nothing
Hmm.
special. It's
Hmm.
just another domain of our life that we need to understand, where we need to be active and effective players for the cause of Christ. It's a way that we can influence people's worldview. It's a way that we can influence their lifestyles. It's a way that we can influence the direction of the country. It's a way that we can impact the world. So why would
Come
we
on.
avoid it?
Yeah, come on. I was speaking for a women's conference in Charlotte over the weekend, and I had the audacity to bring politics up from the stage. A lot of Christian speakers won't do that anymore, and I am of the opinion that we have gotten into this mess largely because Christians have ceded the territory. We just decided, hey, there's two things I was told growing up that the Christians don't talk about. We don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion, right? And that's how we got into this mess, right? Thanksgiving is coming up and they said, oh, the holidays, don't talk about politics and religion. And I'm like, Thanksgiving exists solely because of, wait for it, politics and religion. And the fact that Christians have ceded the territory, which you rightly pointed out, we belong in all of these spheres of influence, of which politics is just one, but politics determines policy and policy shapes nations. So why would Christians not want to be in the policy shaping business?
You know, as a guy who used to be a policy expert in the state government circles, I would say that's the place where we need to be the most.
Yeah.
You know, along with family and whatnot. But I mean, it's a critical dimension. What we've effectively done is we've said, let's remove God's perspectives from public policy and see what we come up with. And I would say, okay, can we now declare that experiment over? We know
Yeah,
what it
that
looks
failed.
like. Yeah, yeah, we know
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't work. And so let's go back to the way that God ordained things. Let's go back to what the founding fathers understood, because they came here from a society where they took faith, where they took biblical truth out of the government domain, out of the national conversation. It was all about what the king wanted. You saw how that worked. They were
Yep.
willing to die to get out of that situation, you know, just to come here and rebuild something that would work.
Mm.
And they had a fabulous plan. They put it together meticulously. It's worked for, you know, a quarter of a millennium. You know,
Yeah.
let's give them some credit here that they knew what they were doing. And
Yeah.
let's go back to that way of doing it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, our Constitution, the greatest probably document for governing human beings ever to have been written. And yet we have fallen for this leftist trope now over the years about the separation of church and state, which was a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Church in Connecticut. I mean, if we just did a little bit of digging if we stopped just believing what we hear on the media day in and day out, and the church would begin to start doing its own research, I think we'd see changes. But boy, we've got a shockingly, still, it seems to be a pretty close election. Now, I'm going to jump ahead of us for a second because I want to know what you think. George, I really want to know what you think. Like if you were going to say, this is who I think is going to win the election just based on sort of what you see in the air, not your polling data, but what you see in the air, what would do you have a sense about it?
Telling me to divorce myself from my polling data.
I was just going to say, you're like, I can't actually do that.
Yeah, it's like saying to a mother, okay, talk about parenting, but don't think about your children, So, yeah, I don't know that I could do that. And one of the things that I've tried really hard to do over the 40-some years I've been doing this is to not speak publicly without data.
Yeah.
Because then it's just one guy's opinion. Who cares about my opinion?
Yeah.
I mean, what I do is I collect the opinions of millions of people and try to report on, here's what they say. I'm just the messenger, but here's what we find from that, as opposed to, being a journalist. Oh, my opinion matters more than anybody else, so listen to me. I don't mind that.
Well, you're saying, I mean, I was shocked by this because you're saying that what you're seeing right now is that the enthusiasm among Christian voters is significantly lower than 2020, and that a massive number of Christians who regularly attend church decided, hey, they're probably not going to vote this November. That is so shocking to me that it is borderline upsetting. I was shocked to see it. And we talked about this on my show the other day, the polling data that you have coming out. It's kind of depressing. And I'm not sure how we get around it.
It's funny when you say that because when people talk about spiritual gifts, they say, I have the gift of discouragement or depression, it's, because of my research. It's,
They tell me that mercy's not high on my spiritual gift list because I was just like, listen, guys, here's what's going on. Right.
Yeah. And you're welcome to borrow my phrase, get over it. That's fine.
Get over it. I think it's a song. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your question?
Well, I was saying you've seen what in the world? I mean, what is going on that the enthusiasm among Christians is lower now that the country is literally on fire. Inflation rates are literally through the roof. The southern border is wide open. Our kids are dying from fentanyl. And you're saying, well, the polling data shows, the data says Christians are not as interested in 2024 as they were in 2020. And I'm just like,
yeah, how's that possible?
What is happening?
Yeah. I mean, and just to put a couple of numbers around it, I mean, what we discovered in terms of projections is that when we did the survey, which was a few weeks ago now, so things will change.
Yeah, it's a fast changing machine, that's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully. But I mean, what we found was that 41 million born again Christians, not people who call themselves born again, but people who theologically speaking we would consider probably to be born again, only God knows. Mm-hmm. But, people who say when I die, I know that I'm going to go to heaven, but only because I confess my sins and accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. That's all I've got to hang on to. That's what I'm trusting for my salvation. That group of people, 41 million of them, were telling us that they're not going to bother voting. We could look at other groups, whether it's people who attend Protestant churches. I think it was 46 million. We look at people who attend evangelical Christian churches. I think it was 14 million who said they're not going to vote. Evangelicals. So we've got issues, and when we ask them, well, why? What's behind your thinking?
That's your new book, George. I just thought of it. We've got issues. All right, the forward. You hook me up. You just let me know when you're ready to write it, and I will write the forward. We've got issues by Dr. George Barna. That's going to sell a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is that
I know that's why I offered to do it.
I'd never finish writing that book. That's the problem. Yeah, because we got so many issues.
We got so many issues.
Maybe that'll be the sequel. We've got so many issues. Yeah.
We got so many issues.
Yeah, so why
So,
aren't people going to do it? I mean, we found that
yeah,
2 out of 3 of them said that they're just not interested in politics and government, so therefore they're not going to vote. We found that 6 out of 10 of them said that they dislike both of the major party candidates. To which my personal response, hey, stand in line. It forms
right,
down the
right.
road a ways. But that's not the issue. Somebody's going to become president, whether we like
That's right.
them or not. And so
Yes.
you got to make the best choice you can. We've got 6 out of 10 of them saying that none of the candidates really reflect their most important personal views. We've got a majority of them saying that they're not going to vote because they think their vote's not going to make a difference. Hey, let me tell you what'll make less difference when you don't bother to show up.
Come on.
We got half of them saying that they're not going to vote because they think the election is too controversial and they don't want to get involved. They don't want people putting pressure on them or criticizing them.
Yeah.
Well, are you breathing? People are going to
Right.
criticize you for everything you do. So make good choices, get involved, make a difference. I mean, the list goes on, but you can see where this is going. These are all ridiculous reasons. None of them stand up to not only the privilege that we have to vote, but the responsibility that we have to vote as Christians, much less as citizens of the country. You want to
Mm,
be a citizen, this is part of what it means to be a citizen, is that you participate in this constitutional republic that we have. That's the way that the country was formed. It's based on the idea that you and me and everybody listening and everybody who's not listening needs to participate in our government choices or decisions. So, yeah, I mean, none of this holds water. But one of the things that fascinated me is that there's no sense of guilt. There's no
mm,
sense of lack of or irresponsibility
mm-hmm.
as in making this choice.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that comes back to 2 places: the family. What do
Mm-hmm.
parents tell their kids about their responsibility as a Christian and as a citizen? And to the church, what are pastors doing about this? And I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's something you want to talk about, but we looked at that in this research as well.
I absolutely want to talk about it. I've got a vested interest. A, I have a family, and B, I go to church. And so it's alarming to me the number of pastors who are really, I hold them responsible in many ways for falling for the Johnson Amendment, for falling for the separation of church and state, for deciding that the church doesn't talk about politics. I mean, for the Lev. George, I want to know what you think about this. And I said this, publicly when I was running for Congress over and over and over again. If a pastor comes to me and he says, "Well, Heidi, we don't do politics in our church. We're a 501c3." My answer to him is, "So what you're telling me is you will not defend the position that God would have in our culture because you want more money from the government." It's about money. I mean, isn't that what the 501c3 is about? It's about money. And they've effectively used it in many cases to scare pastors into silence. And I kind of think, hey, that was probably the goal.
Yeah, wow, you're touching on a lot of points. My brain is in overload right now. One of the things that we know is that when pastors evaluate their ministry at their church, because we ask them this in our surveys every year, is your church effective in ministry? And we get more than 4 out of 5 of them say, oh, yeah. It's like, great, all right. So how do you know that? On what basis do you make that claim? And what we find is that a huge majority of churches base that on 5 things. They measure how many people show up,
Mm,
how many programs the church offers, how many staff members the church has hired for those programs, how much money the church raises, and how much square footage they've built out on their campus or campuses
mm,
these days. And the determination of effectiveness is based on those numbers being larger during the most recent weekend than they were 52 weekends previously, in other words, a year ago.
mm-hmm.
And so that's what they're gauging on. Now, I'm a measurement guy, so I'm always happy when people are trying to, measure things in an objective manner. But
Mm-hmm.
the problem is, in this case, Jesus didn't die for any of those 5 things. So for us to measure attendance and giving and programs and staffing and square footage, Jesus didn't die to put butts in seats in a building. Jesus didn't die so that the church would have the biggest real estate portfolio in the community. Jesus didn't die so that we would employ more people with people's donations. That's not how it's supposed to work. And then when we go back and we ask them, well, how do you measure discipleship in your church? Blank stares. We found that less than 1% of churches in America do anything to effectively measure discipleship. So we've got real issues in terms of what the church, as a professional organization, thinks it exists to do. When it comes to this whole issue of the Johnson Amendment, what's interesting to me is that there are a group of courageous Christians, I'll call them, who have gotten pastors at a variety of churches to send in sermons to the IRS, which is who would have to enforce the Johnson Amendment.
Yeah.
But what they've done is they've enlisted churches, and they now have a couple thousand churches across the country that have sent in full-length sermons to the IRS with a note saying, hey, just thought you might want to know this past Sunday I preached about the election. I told people who to vote for. I told them how important it was to vote. I told them what the Bible says about these particular issues. If you have problems with this, please contact me at this number. None of them over the last 12 years have ever been contacted by the IRS because they really can't. It's illegal. The IRS has no authority to shut down a church for preaching about whatever they want to preach about. That's what free speech is about. That's what freedom of religion is about. And by the way, folks, that's why you need to vote, is to maintain those freedoms. Because if you don't vote in this election more than any previous one we've ever had, those freedoms will be removed perhaps within the next 4 years if you vote for the wrong candidates or if you choose not to vote at all. That's on the line. So you've got to participate in this process. People have died for those freedoms. And for you to say, it's inconvenient for me to vote, or I don't really like the demeanor of the candidates. I don't know if my vote's going to make a difference. Get over it. Cast a ballot by November 5th or on November 5th and make your views known. And when you do that, do your homework before you vote. There's nothing worse than an ignorant voter. And the way that you do your homework is by reading the Bible in one hand and by looking at the party platforms and the candidate positions in the other hand, and compare the two and determine for president, for Senate, for House of Reps, for statewide offices, for the initiatives and referenda on your ballot in your state. Figure out who's coming closest to God's word. Vote for those people.
Boy, that is the responsibility. I thought it was interesting that you said, and I think it's absolutely right, that we really have had a generation, it seems like, who they don't feel the pressure. They don't feel the responsibility. When I was growing up, my granddad was a pastor, and he took me campaigning for Reagan, in the early 80s, and I remember it. And my granddad was telling me, this is such a privilege. This is a duty. You have an opportunity and an obligation. My grandparents made me feel obligated. And so by the time I turned 18, boy, Heidi St. John getting out there to vote. And I have been fascinated with politics all of my life, mostly because my grandparents, who granddad was a senior pastor to church, told me that it was my duty and my responsibility. How do we get back to that? How do we engage the rising generation to see the beautiful responsibility that they have as a duty, this that we get to participate? Like, people will say to me, well, Jesus wasn't a Republican. Jesus didn't vote. Well, Jesus didn't live in a constitutional republic. And I wonder what would happen, and I don't know how, and maybe you've got some insight in this because you talk to so many people. How do you see going forward, post-election, that we change the narrative so that our young people again feel a sense of duty and responsibility to engage in the system that you rightly pointed out? People died so that we can participate.
Yeah, Heidi, I think there are probably 4 actors in the solution to that question. One of those has to be parents and grandparents. we have to raise our children to understand exactly what your grandfather did with you, to recognize that, you know what, you're a citizen of this country and you're a citizen of heaven. And both of them require you to take your responsibilities seriously. And one of them is to participate in the development of the values that will shape the world that you live in. And so, as your parent or your grandparent, I'm going to be involved in shaping your worldview while you're a child, because that's when it gets shaped, before the age of 13. And then I want to be there to influence you as you're thinking about voting, as you're thinking about volunteering, as you're thinking about donating, as you're thinking about having conversations about the issues and the policies and the opportunities with other people. I want you to be thinking seriously, first of all, biblically, and secondly, as a committed American to the Constitution. So think biblically and constitutionally as you're having those conversations and getting involved. So family is first and foremost. But secondly, who's gonna instruct the family? Well, that's what the local church needs to be doing, is providing us with that kind of biblical input. I don't care about the pastor's personal views. All I want is somebody who studies the Bible, loves the Bible, and is going to be teaching from the Bible what the Bible says about the issues and responsibilities. And so churches have not been doing that. In this study that we've been talking about, that I put out a couple weeks ago, we found that most pastors are shying away from political responsibilities. Now, about half of them have said that their people should vote. Half? Really? That's the best we could do.
It should be 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. 101 if we can.
Yeah.
And then we look at the other things that churches could be doing. Registering voters. Only about 1 out of 4 churches have bothered to do that. Teaching congregants what the Bible says about the issues that are being raised in the election. What an incredible opportunity to get people, when they're interested in these issues. Pastors always say, how do I get people to pay attention? Well, how about you talk about the things that are real in their lives? And so what's real in their lives during an election season? What do we do about crime? What do we do about poverty? What do we do about an invasion over the border? What do we do about the economy? All of these issues and more that are being raised every day. You can't escape them in the news. You can't escape them if you pay attention to the candidates. You can't escape them if you look at your ballot and the initiatives and referenda that are there. That's where they are. Hey, how about we teach what the Bible says about those things? Wouldn't that be helpful to people? Why would I do that? Because we should be telling our people to do that as part of their homework before they vote. How about if you help them with their homework? Wouldn't that be great? So these kinds of things, we're not doing it. What we found is that pastors, if they've taught about anything, any issues, they've taught about religious freedom, great. They've taught about poverty, excellent. About half of them have taught about abortion, good. Hey, other half, wake up, please.
Right.
But then you look at all these other issues that we're scared to touch on. Why? It goes back to those 5 things that I told you they're measuring. And so now if you start talking about inflation, you start talking about taxes, you talk about crime, you talk about poverty, you talk about immigration, they're going to say, yeah, but those are controversial. Some people don't want me to open my mouth about that.
Yeah, we may lose some giving units coming to our church.
Absolutely. Hey, but let me tell you something. Let me tell you who does want you to talk about that. God Almighty. Why? Because he put information about that in his word. Why did he do that? Because he wants us to understand it. Why does he want us to understand it? So that we will use it as we make decisions every moment of every day in our lives. That's the information that shapes a person's worldview. And if you're not going to teach them that, get out of the pulpit. We don't need you there, because you're not going to give people what they need. And so I'm asking you, please do the job that God has called you to do. If he's called you, this is another conversation for another time, Heidi. But some of the other research that I do with pastors shows that, frankly, most pastors in America, based on the research I've done, I know this is controversial, but they're not called to be pastors of churches. It's a career path that they followed after their version of grad school, which was seminary or Bible college. And so they believe, well, naturally, I'm going to go into ministry. No, not naturally. You only go there if God has called you to do that. Now, I'm not questioning whether he's called you to ministry, because I know that God's called every Christian
Every one
to
of
be
us.
involved in
Yep.
ministry.
Yep.
But maybe it's not as the pastor or associate pastor or children's pastor or executive pastor at a church. Maybe it's to get a job at some corporation and to serve as a lay pastor through your occupational service. What a
Come
great
on.
opportunity to reach people that churches may never reach. Put that in your head, you know. So, I mean, we could have all kinds of conversations off this, but anyway, I started to say, all right, so it starts with family, it goes to pastors. Pastors have to prepare the family to have those conversations, to understand that responsibility. Thirdly, friends. If I have friends who are not Christians, or I have friends who are Christians and plan not to vote, that's on me. I need to use my influence through my relationship with those people and the trust that I've developed with them over the years of our relationship to encourage them to vote and to vote biblically. Now, here's something else that comes out of the research. We found that of the 80 different segments of the population that I typically study in every national survey I do, of those 80 segments, the single least likely group of people to engage in conversation about the election, or any election that I've been studying for the last 20 some years, are born again Christians.
That is so shocking. It's so, it makes my head hurt. It
Yeah,
makes my head hurt
makes
that we've
mine
been
explode.
told,
Yeah,
yeah, that we've been told for all of these years that we shouldn't talk about politics. And we've literally been told that. When I was in North Carolina last weekend, 2,000 women in a room. And I said to them, how many of you have been told that as a Christian, you are not to talk about politics? George, I would say 80% of them. 80%
yeah,
of the women in that room raised their hand and said, yeah, that's what we were told. And it's a lie.
yeah. Well, it's certainly unbiblical.
Yeah.
So I would say the third person who can have influence in all this has to be friends. And
Yeah.
we've got to be looking at our friends and our family and go to them. And then, of course, family. I bring that up because family has influence on family. And so,
100%.
I mean, as a father of three grown children, I talk to every one of my daughters about the election. We talk about the issues. And 2 weeks, I'm in that cycle right now where it's like, did you get your ballot in yet? Did you get your ballot in yet? And
Sir, I am doing the same thing. We
yeah,
can stand in solidarity.
yeah.
Did you get your ballot in? Why not? When are you going to sign it? Did you check your ballot? Yeah, I know. We're doing the same thing.
And if we get down to the day before Election Day, November 5th, on November 4th, I will be in touch with them to ask them, okay, is it in yet? And if not, I'll go to their house. I'll say,
Yeah.
okay, let's fill it out now, because in
We're going out
California,
for coffee. I'm going
yeah,
to take you out for coffee, and we're going to drink it as we drive by and vote. Yes.
or if you want to stay home because you don't want to leave the kids or your husband or whatever,
I'll
great,
take
I'm
it.
all for it. That's fine. Let's sit down at the kitchen table. Let's fill it out now. Here,
Yes.
look, I brought my ballot. I will show you how I was voting. And if you don't like how I'm voting, or if you question why I voted that way, great, great. Let's dig into it.
Let's
Because
talk about it.
I spent hours and hours doing research on this. I'm thrilled to share it with anybody who's interested. So we go through that, but that's a parent's responsibility. It's a grandparent's responsibility. Family is critical in this process.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I wonder, what would happen. I mean, actually, I don't wonder. I know what would happen if Christian parents would take this responsibility seriously again. My husband and I have raised all 7 of our kids in a very politically minded and active home, and I still am struggling with some of my adult kids who are just like, oh, I'm busy, or I've got this going on, or it really doesn't matter, or one vote doesn't make a difference. Well, tell that to Dino Rossi, who lost the governorship in Washington State by 44 votes, and he said at an event that I heard about recently, because Washington State has not had a Christian or conservative governor for 40 years. 40 years. And he was trying to break that streak. And he said that the thing that hurts him the most is when he's, out on, campaigning for other people. Now it's been years and years since he lost that race. He said the thing that hurts him the most is people coming up to him and saying, 44 votes. Man, I wish I would have understood it was going to be that close. I would have got out and voted. And he's just like,
Yeah, yeah,
he said it literally hurts to hear people say that. to think that their vote wasn't important when everyone's vote is so important.
You know, one of the things that I found as I was doing this study was if you look back at the 2020 election, there were 9 battleground states. And if you look at the margin of victory across all 9 of those states, it's less than 600,000 votes. And so basically what we're saying is, you know, if we could have raised 600,000 votes in those 9 states, we could have changed the outcome in those states. 600,000 votes in 9 states, I mean, 60,000 votes roughly per state, 70,000, that's nothing. And,
No.
you know, so, yeah, I mean, every vote really does make a difference. You may think, yeah, but if I put it in, it doesn't make a difference. No, but there are thousands of people thinking like you. And if each of you were to, you know, fulfill your duty, your constitutional duty to vote, your biblical responsibility to be an impactful citizen, then it would change these elections. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to say it this way derogatorily, but even President Trump the other day in a town hall meeting that he had, somebody asked him about our research that said, you know, all these Christians are not going to vote. What do you make of that? And his response was, you know, if Christians would vote, we'd never lose another election.
We would win.
And he's
We
absolutely
would
correct.
win.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are, you know, beating the same drum over here. And I had the opportunity to speak at Olympia in a rally this last summer, trying to get parents to engage in the issue of parental rights. For goodness sake, it's on the ballot. It's on the ballot in Missouri. It's on the ballot in Florida. It's on the ballot in California. They want to strip you of your parental rights.
Sure.
Kamala Harris is no friend of parents. And she would love to see into law that if you decide that your child, if you recognize, oh my goodness, my child is struggling with their gender identity because they're being brainwashed by the broken, woke public school system, and now they want to transition from a boy to a girl, these people would make it so that your child was literally taken from you. And it was shocking to me to see the number of parents. And I told them, I said, you guys, if God's people would vote, and then they would vote biblically, we would win. We would win. And I think this is the issue, at least for my generation. This is going to be the defining issue of where this country heads in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
Yeah, you know, both you and I live in unusual states that are becoming the norm. You know, I live in the Socialist Republic of California, and I mean, they're doing everything they can to take away every right that we've got.
It's shocking. It's
Yeah,
shocking.
and when I say that, people say, "Oh, come on, you're overstating the case." Really?
Nope.
Really?
Nope.
I mean, I could tell you stories, you know, personal stories. I won't, but yeah, I mean, it's atrocious. And how do we change that? The only way to change it is by participating. You know, it intrigues me when you're at a church and you think the pastor's not doing the job. Boy, Christians rise up and they run that pastor out of the church. Why is it any different with the government? Why do we think that the government should be immune from the same kind of study and objective measurement that we have with our churches? We've got to get involved.
Yeah, we've got to get involved. We've got about a minute left of this conversation. I mean, I could talk to you. I'm gonna have to come back on because I could talk to you. I can tell for hours and hours and hours on end. Give a little bit of encouragement. This podcast is going to air probably tomorrow. We're 6 days out then from I think what is going to be. And we say it every year, but my goodness, I think it's more true this year than it's ever been. This election is going to determine the trajectory of our country, and people need to remember this long after. These people have left the White House. The implications of the policies that they put into place are going to reverberate throughout our country for generations. What is some encouragement that you can give in the next couple of days as people consider their responsibility and what they can do?
Think about this coming week as the opportunity that you have to be a significant player for the kingdom of God in America. Look at your friends, look at your work associates, look at the children who, and their families that you encounter during the week, and understand that you don't have those relationships by accident. There's a purpose for that. There is no coincidence to all of this. And the purpose is that you represent Christ everywhere you are, every moment of every day. And right now, the opportunity that you have relates to politics. It relates to the election. Don't say, well, I'm uncomfortable with that, so I'm not going to take my responsibility seriously. Remember, I mean, we're all going to give account to a holy and righteous God someday for every choice that we've made. And so make the right choice here. Recognize that you have to be an agent of influence, an agent of transformation in our culture. This election is so important in that regard. Just look back at what's happened the last 4 years. If you think it's been bad for the last 4 years, if there's an administration that continues those policies, it's only going to get deeper and darker and worse, particularly for Christians. The persecution rate is going to ramp up like you can't imagine. I mean, we've already seen mentions of that on the campaign trail.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you've got to take this seriously and do everything you can. A week, come on, for a week, you can make some big differences if you're willing to do so. Pray that the Holy Spirit will empower you, will open your eyes, will give you the wisdom to say the words coming out of your mouth that are going to change lives for the better and to advance God's kingdom.
That is exactly right. Dr. George Barna, you are a national treasure. Thank you for coming on the show with me and for your boldness to engage the conversation that I hope people will share with their pastors in the days leading up to the election. And we're going to just pray together in unison that we see a change and that we see the country go on a different direction. Thank you for coming on the show. It's just been a delight to have you. If people want to find your research and learn more about the work you're doing, where's the best place for them to do that?
You can go to one of two places. GeorgeBarna.com has all the reports that I write. They're there for free. And you could also get those at culturalresearchcenter.com. I'm in Arizona Christian University. We have the Cultural Research Center there. So that's the website that has all of our research that we do.
I love that. Listeners of the show know I'm a super fan of Arizona Christian University, so I was excited to hear you partnering with them. Excited to see you. Let's stay in touch. I'd love to have you back on the show again.
Thanks, Heidi. Great to be with you. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you guys for tuning in to listen to my interview with my friend Dr. Barna today. I hope it's been encouraging for you. If you've been encouraged by this interview, please, please, please share it with your pastor, share it with your friends. I agree with George today. Text somebody and say, have you gotten out and voted? If you're a mother or a dad listening to this and your kids are old enough to vote, engage with them. Talk to them about the importance and the duty and the opportunity that we have to participate in choosing the leaders of our country. I want to invite you again to pray with me. I'm praying every weekday starting at 8 a.m. and you can sign up by simply going to HeidiSt.John.com, click on the subscribe link and subscribe to Heidi St. John, and you will get a series of freebies and also the graphic that I have created that tells exactly what we're praying for each week and each day, along with some scripture that you can pray with me. But join me live, you guys. There is something powerful about God's people engaging in prayer. We're doing that every Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. for about 20 minutes, so from 8 a.m. to 8:20, and we're going to do it all the way through the Friday after the election and just come before the Lord together and petition Him for mercy in our country and for God's people to engage. I hope you've loved this podcast as much as I have. Get out and vote, you guys, and I'll see you right back here again at the intersection of faith and